Okay, so for you older guys, right, the fountain of youth, I'm going to tell you how you find this. Not so you feel like a teenager, right, but you actually are a teenager. You live in the mindset of a teenager, right? Take on a project that's completely out of your wheelhouse. Do something that you've never done before. Like our Miata, you know, in my life, I'm almost 60 years old. I have never once, even for an instant, considered going around a turn or stopping. That's just not my thing. And suddenly, look, I'm building an autocross car. More on this later. Off-roading. Never in my life have I ever put together any type of car where I didn't give primary consideration to weight. It had to be light, right? Not this one. This thing's going to hit the scales at about 4,000 pounds when I'm done. I want to bring you guys up to speed with it. And for those who aren't familiar with the project, I'll explain it as we go along. Okay, first, the history of this. We started building this car in November of last year. Worked on it for a little bit. Got the, okay, so it's a 71D100 truck chassis. I shortened it 20 inches. This is a 1968 Valiant parts car. We mounted the body on the car. And the inspiration for this project, and I don't think I ever talked about this, right? The inspiration for this project were the 1969 factory AMC Baja races. If you guys have ever seen these things, they're awesome. AMC built a small fleet, I think they built 10 of them altogether, of Ramblers Scramblers to run the Baja 1000 and other off-road races. They were just trying to put their fingers into every little pot. And most of them were two-wheel drive. They were for the passenger car class. They built two of them, I think, that were four-wheel drive for a higher class, whatever it happened to be. But the stance and the look of those cars was just like off the chain. So when I started putting this together, like that was the vision I had in my mind. So that's why when we positioned the body on the frame, you know, I didn't want it to sit too high. I wanted it to sit just right. I was trying to capture that aesthetic. We'll show you a picture of those cars. So that's where we're at with this. Now, ironically enough, the last video we did was on the Chrysler unibody. And what I'm doing with this is actually creating my own unibody. Most of the time you see these things, it's just a butchered thing where they take a truck frame and they bolt a car body on top of it and send it. And the thing's all weird and high and awkward and stuff. What I did here was I channeled the body over the chassis, and I'm creating a unibody in here. So where we left off with this back in December was I had fixed the body in place and I had added braces. I had added diagonals like those right there, front and back, to brace the body from going back and forth this way. Those uprights up underneath the dashboard, you see? Okay, to brace the top of the cowl. Basically, to tie this original truck chassis into the unibody of the car and make it complete. This isn't just sheet metal, this is all 16 gauge steel. This thing is more Killdozer than hot rod. I mean, it's tough. So this is where I've been working on lately here, the last couple of days. The flux core has been flowing. This is all boxed in here now, right? Both sides. Here's the firewall. I had a big block. I'll talk about the motor in a minute. I had a big block and a torque flight in here, so it's been all mocked up in place, and there's plenty of room to work on everything. So my next step here is to close this area off, and then move on to the transmission tunnel, which you can see I built this out of angle iron, and the transmission tunnel acts as a brace to the whole car, right? And the whole floor will be made out of this 16 gauge steel. So, the last thing I did before we left the old place, or the first step in this, was steering. I didn't want to relocate the steering box. I love the front end on this thing. I love the geometry on it. I wouldn't change it for the world. Right? It's just perfect. There's a let's call it 6-inch, 7-inch difference in the dimension. So the steering box is here, and the center of the steering wheel is here. So originally, and I may still do it, I don't know. Originally, I was going to just put 2 U-joints, you know, to just kick the steering over. But to get this thing on the trailer and get it over here, is let me whip up something real quick so I could at least turn the wheels and get it moving. So what I did was I took a stock coupler, right, and I removed the shoes you know, there were rectangular shoes that fit here in this coupler, and instead of shoes, I used nuts, a pair of nuts that fit over the pins of the steering shaft, and basically turned this into a universal joint. Again, this was temporary. I only did this real quick so I'd be able to steer the thing to get it here, right? And then here, if you come over here, this is the stock center shaft of a column, and all I did was weld this piece of tubing to support it. Well, you know what? As it turns out, this angle that it's on, it's on about, the steering wheel's on probably like an 8 or 10 degree angle. It doesn't bother me that much, and this is a very clean and efficient way to do this. I may, after I'm going to leave that contingency open. I may redo the steering and put 2 universal joints to get it straight. But as of right now, this is fine for me. I'm happy with it. We'll see how it is when we actually start living with it. I got to sheet out the transmission tunnel, the rest of the firewall, and these floor sections. And then we start working on the mechanical end of things. So let me explain another thing about this car too. We're building it, the target finish date is September for the Tennessee Gambler 500 race, which is either on or off depending on what day of the week or who you talk to or where you see. So I don't even know if this race is going to happen, but the car is scheduled, the build is supposed to be finished in time for that, and we will definitely make that. That's not a question. Whether or not that race actually happens, I have no control over. But we're not just building the car for that race. We're building this thing as like, I call it the adventure car. I want this thing to be drive anywhere, any conditions, any on-road, off-road, overlanding, mud racing, whatever it happens to be. It's not a rock crawler. It'll never do that sort of thing. But I want it to be a fast, fun off-road car that we can go enter different types of competitions and have fun with. And even like maybe do some overlanding, put a giant fuel tank in the back, and But anyway, that's where we're at with the framework on this car and moving forward. The motor, it's a 383 we're using in this. I picked up these 516 heads. They're the small exhaust valve 516s, but they're fine for what we're doing. Just got to clean them up, throw some fresh springs in it, give it a valve job, and we're good to go. That's the rear sump oil pan for it. I dug this cam out. This is an old Crane 302H. It's an obsolete cam. It's been out of production for a while. But this thing, I had this in a 383 years ago, and the only reason I took it out is because I went to a bigger roller. But this thing made just like enormous mid-range, like 3,500 to like 5,500 RPM power. I think that's going to be just about perfect for that. So the motor's going to be a stock bore, stock stroke, 383, 9-to-1 compression or thereabout. I'm using that cam, this Edelbrock, the TM6 intake. These things are great. This is like a horse of an intake manifold. And not sure about the carburetor yet. I'm more concerned with low, mid-range drivability, highway drivability than I am with ultimate power. So I don't really know what we're going to do with that yet. So that's the, what else do I have for that? And yes, I saved the old lifters and kept them in order for this cam. So we'll go back together again without having any problem. That's it. Roll after roll of flux core. I just picked up another sheet of 16 gauge. Guys, if you're building something and you need metal for it, like go get it now, because the price of that metal, it went. The last sheet of this I bought was back in December. The one that I've used so far in the car, and it was like 65 bucks. I just same place, $120 with tax for that same piece of steel. So if you're building something and you need metal for it, go get it now. Like metal inflation, material inflation is off the chain. So that's it. And I'm doing both of these cars simultaneously. I want them both done at the same time. The fall, definitely while there's still some activity left for the season. So I've just got them side by side, and I just bounce from one to the other, go back and forth. And I'm honestly, sometimes it's easier to do 2 projects at a time than it is to do just one, because your head's in the, in the doing this, and it's like, oh, okay, well, do this. So, now, that's it for now. We'll check back on this in a week or two. See you tomorrow.